is Jessica Webster.
And this is Sam Pogue of the Fitness Break Room podcast. Sit back, take a well-deserved break, and learn about the journey that helps shape the most successful fitness professionals in the industry today. Hey guys, welcome to the Fitness Break Room. I am blessed to be sitting with Dr. Mike T. Nelson, coming down from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to join us here on the podcast today. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So Mike just came down to teach the RPR seminar, the level 1, and be able to share some of this new principle-based system for resetting your nervous system.
Yeah.
Can you tell the people a little bit about what RPR is?
Yeah, so RPR is Reflexive Performance Reset, and it's a way of literally poking on different targets on the body to wake up specific muscles. So we'll show you a way to determine if the muscle is working as well as it should or not, and then what the target is, how to interact with the target, whether that's someone else or doing it on yourself, and then how to retest again. So the cool part is, as you mentioned, it's working with the nervous system, so you'll know right away if you made a difference or not. So you can have a pretty fast way to eval athletes and clients and things of that nature.
Nice. And you feel like this is a good thing for even like a young new trainer getting into the industry to be able to do to help his or her clients?
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. Now, obviously, I'm biased because I teach it and that type of thing, of course. But the thing I love about the system is that it's pretty easy to interact with. So, like, for example, when we went through the certification here, at the end of each one, I'd ask, okay, how many people got better, and anyone didn't change, and how many got worse? I don't think we had a single person that ever got worse, right? So there's not as much of a downside, again, as long as you're not being a dumbass and doing some stupid stuff. Most people got better, probably 70, 80%, maybe even a little bit higher on some of them. A few people here and there stayed about the same. And most people that we had go through haven't ever done any body work. They're not a physical therapist. There's some in the room, but over half of them were not. So they were literally doing their very first reps, learning the system, and they're still getting a very good result. So that's one thing I look at is what is the result you can get? How fast can you get the result? How safe is it, right? Making sure there's not much of a downside. And then how easy can you then apply it and teach it, right? So if you're a coach, maybe you just then go through and just show your clients, okay, do this spot, do this spot, do this spot, so they can then do it on themselves. And it's not a 17-point checklist of how to just do one point. It's pretty simple. Poke here, do this. Oh, okay. It's relatively easy to interact with, which makes it nice.
I did like how the simplicity of it, right? Not that in theory, because it's actually very complex if you got into the neuro side of it, but the application is very simple for everybody to implement, whether it's working on the back of the skull to release or activate the glutes, or in the abdomen to help with the gastroc. It was so simple. It almost seems weird that it doesn't work, or that it does work.
Yeah, oh, totally. Like I spent like a year when I first did it, over a year, just like testing it all the time, and I think like one-off sessions, I think I've done like 120 now or something like that, and because I didn't believe it. Yeah. I went through, I felt it, I did all the training and everything, and I'm like, huh. And I'm like, maybe that's just me. So you try the next person, it's same thing. And like virtually almost all the time, with rare exceptions, a few exceptions here and there, wow, it actually worked.
Yeah.
Which even to this day still kind of boggles the mind. But yeah, it appears to work pretty much every time. And then you compare notes with someone like Cal Dietz, who's been doing it for 5 years, and Doug Heel, who came up with the system it's based on from Be Activated, and practitioners from there. And everybody seems to be seeing almost the same thing. So
that's awesome. And it's one of those things, I don't know, maybe you can describe it better, but you have your application side, like your coach in you and your strength coach side of you, but then you have your educated side, and those two worlds don't always link up.
They usually don't, unfortunately.
So how did you ascertain the information? Like when you're like, I don't get it at first, why it doesn't work. Like how did you digest all this new information between those two realms for yourself?
Yeah, so what I do initially when I try to learn a new system, so I go in and go, okay, how can I try to put aside everything else that I know? I'm going to take this certification thing for 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, whatever, and just try to, get in sort of the mind of the person presenting. How do they think? How do they see the world? What is their experience? How can I learn their system using their terms, their confines as much as I can? I'll then go out and try to apply it only using their system for a period of time. How well can I figure this out? How kind of good of an operator can I be? Not that in some systems I'm not great of an operator at all, but just to get that practice. Because I think it's one thing to look at all the theory and then you won't learn it as well until you actually apply it.
Yep.
And then after I've done that, I'll look and say, okay, how well does it work with the other stuff I've done? Is it faster? Is it better in certain areas? And then I'll try to maybe mix stuff a little bit. And then along the way, if I figure out, okay, this seems to work really well, okay, now why does that work other than just the principles that I was taught? Are there other things going on? Is there a nervous system thing? Do the principles kind of fit sort of the hierarchy of how I view everything and kind of go from there? And what's interesting about the RPR stuff is that I still don't even know like how most of the points work, to be honest. Like I have some wackadoodle theories of stuff, not really a lot of direct research on it, which literally just means we don't know, right? So if there's not research on it, you can't say, well, that doesn't work.
Right.
Well, the reality is maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. If there's no research, the answer is we don't know. So you're left with kind of a lot of the anecdotal stuff, which appears to work within limits. So I am working to try to get a couple more people just to do some more basic testing and things of that nature too. But it's a stretch, right? So you're poking around the back of your head and you're telling someone, yep, that's an activation wake-up drill for your glute max. They're like, what are you talking about?
It's super weird.
And it's bizarre, but then you do it, you feel it, and you've done it. Like, wow, that seems to work. And stuff we've done with vertical jump, I know Cal Dietz has done a lot of this stuff, HRV, performance, sprint times, other kind of sort of anecdotal type information, obviously not peer reviewed at this point. All those tend to show positive changes then too. So for me, it's hard to, back to your question, I have to kind of take part of my brain and set it aside.
Yeah.
Because it's super easy to go around and go, wow, there's no research on that.
Right.
It's crap, no research. Crap, no research. Crap, no research. And it's another thing to do the actual research. And then it's another thing to say, okay, so if I'm living in an area where I actually have to apply stuff for a living and helping other people who apply stuff for a living, then my first goal is to figure out, does it work and is it safe? Regardless if there's research or not. So research will help me kind of point me in that direction. And then if we want to try to get more research, then that's cool. You're back to the same question again. Number one thing for research, in my opinion, is does it work? Right? So before you did a trial on the different points to see what the mechanism is, you'd have to say, do they actually work in terms of a research setting? And then you can try to figure out the possible why and mechanism and that kind of stuff too.
And I feel like that's a really good point to bring up just because so many individuals come out of school being very like, oh, I went to school for exercise science, or I'm a physical therapist, or a chiro, or a massage therapist. And they might have a lot of intrinsic knowledge about the body and how it works, but application and being able to, okay, I'm going to take this side of my body, my mind, and set it over here, and I'm going to see in theory, how does this actually work? I think that's super important for people to experience because as we were just talking about before we got started, your experience in the market is just as valuable as the education that you have. And you've been through a couple years of school in your day. So if you guys haven't been following Mike's work, he's been in the game a few years, but has also been in the research game for how many years now?
I mean, technically I did 18 years of college, which I don't know if I'd recommend that path, but
and not on the Van Wilder side of the 18 years of college, but on the like a good student and learning side of it.
Yeah, just
so, 3
different areas. So
this isn't the first fitness system that you've taught. You've actually taught
Correct.
for a lot of other fitness education systems. What were those?
So I started off, I did some stuff through Z Health. I did their R phase, I phase, S phase, T phase, 9S. Taught a little bit of a short segment at 9S and a few things here and there along the way. Went through and actually did their full, the first master trainer certification they did, which was basically just a 6-day horrible eval. And yeah, that sucked.
It's a lot of days. Like I'm gassed after 2 days. Or yours, I was like, I got done after 1 day. I was like, wow, I'm okay. trying to figure it out. Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine 6 days of immersive.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. And the funny part is later I found the guy who I knew was a friend of mine who designed it. And the initial one they did, and it's probably changed a little bit since then, is he set it up to make it like just as hellacious as possible. And the thing that made it hard was not only did you have to know everything from the previous systems, you had to do 2 presentations with original research, original things.
Whoa.
And then the worst part was they put these drills in a hat. And so at any point they would pull a drill out of the hat and go, okay, demonstrate this, show the nerve, the muscle, all those things, do it in front of everybody else, and we'll eval you. And here's your drill, and okay, looks like Bob's up. But you didn't know really when those were going to come up. So for
Wow.
me, that kind of unknowing aspect, and they also said, okay, you have to get 90% or higher in order to pass, but you didn't know your final score until the last day. So as you're going through, you don't
Oh.
have any feedback as to where you're at either. So that to me was like really just nerve wracking. And I talked to the guy later who designed it. I said, well, "You're the one who designed it?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I did all that stuff on purpose to make it as hard as possible, just to screw with people." And I'm like, "Oh." I said, "Well, did you ever plan on taking it?" He's like, "Hell no." I was like, "Oh, great, thanks." But yeah, so I passed that, and then decided not to teach for them.
Okay.
Went off and did some stuff through PRI, so Postural Restoration Institute from Ron Haraska. So I ended up taking about 4 of their classes. Super interesting, very like fascinating, just how they view the world and what they look at. Because I also have some vision issues I've been trying to sort out too. So I did 14 months of working with them for movement stuff, some vision stuff, had some special glasses and all that kind of
Wow.
stuff along the way. Super helpful, was able to squat again without pain. Everything was a lot better. And along the way, I did some stuff with Tom Myers from Anatomy Trains, did a full 5-day fresh tissue dissection. They usually have that in Arizona and Denver, I think now. But if everyone gets a chance to do it, like they should totally do it. You literally get one cadaver, and there's 8 people. It's about 4 days of actual dissection.
Wow.
And they show you a little bit how to do it. The guy who runs the lab, Todd Garcia, is just an amazing dissector. And you literally just look at whatever you want. You know, if you really
wow.
are excited about the knee, you can spend 3 days looking at the knee or the shoulder or the head, or if you kind of want to bop around from one area to the next. And you're literally doing all the cuts yourself. You're literally doing all the dissection yourself.
Whoa.
And it's amazing because a lot of the stuff I did in the past was in balm tissue. You just can't see a lot of the connective tissue and other things like that. With a fresh tissue, you can see all the fascia. You can look like between the tibia and the fibia. You can see the fascia, and you can see how the orientation is actually crossed and mixed. So you can see that it's basically forming along lines of force, but it's not all these nice, neat linear patterns that we think. Yeah, so if you get the chance, I'd highly recommend that. And done some other courses from Michelle Dalcourt and some other people, NSCA, continuing ed, that kind of stuff. So.
And what's your traditional education in? Your
Yeah.
4 or 5 degrees, 6 degrees, 9 degrees?
So I did a Bachelor of Arts in Natural Science.
Okay.
And at the time, I wanted to do physiology, but back in the early 90s, the training really wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And you could basically do it, and then you just had to be a professor. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go through and do all that. So I used to take apart these radio-controlled cars I had. I had a 10th scale one. And I would spend just hours modifying that, creating parts for it, all this stuff. And so they're like, oh, well, you like physiology, and you appear to like this weird engineering stuff. You should do biomedical engineering.
Weird engineering stuff.
And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. What do I know?
Yeah.
So I did that, and then did 2 years of postgraduate work at Michigan Tech to just basically take all my engineering classes. And then I did a master's there in mechanical engineering, another 2.5 years. Initially, I was looking at solid mechanics, so more on the biomechanics realm, but more from the engineering type side. And I just took physiology classes for fun. Like for me, like to take anatomy and physiology as my undergrad was just for fun. When I got to grad school, I was so excited because they had just hired an exercise physiology professor. So I asked him, I was already maxed out on my credits for engineering stuff. And I asked him, I said, hey, can I take your class? And he's like, well, sure, just sign up. I said, but I don't really want to pay the extra credit load. I don't need the credits. Can I just audit the class? And he's like, well, no one really asked to audit a class in 300 level exercise physiology who's not in the major. And he's like, well, sure, technically I can't allow it, but if you happen to show up every day in the class that I teach, I'm not going to say anything. Like, cool, man, that's cool.
I'm sorry to all of you that struggled through exercise phys, and Mike's like, I took it for fun.
Yeah.
Just
I'm like,
because I want to.
I'm like, this is so cool. I finally get to take exercise phys. Because when I did my undergrad, they taught it, but at a master's level. Tommy Boone was the instructor because it was a big physical therapy college. And I tried and petitioned and audited them, and they just said, no way, it's in a separate college, it's at a master's level, you can't audit it. You either have to be a physical therapy student or not. And so the same guy there actually taught aerospace physiology the next quarter, which is, if anyone gets a chance to take it, it's the direct opposite of exercise physiology, because you chuck someone up into microgravity, and everything just basically goes to hell, right? So you start losing muscle, you start losing bone, you got fluid shifts.
Wow.
It's literally like the anti of exercise physiology.
Right.
And at the time, I'm like, this is perfect, right? Because it's like, okay, study what happens when you stimulate the system here. Now study what happens when you just pull all that stimulus away, like even start pulling gravity away as a stimulus. Basically, what you find is everything just goes to hell like super fast.
Crazy.
But what's interesting about that in my brain, and it still sticks in there today, is that if you can get a good enough stimulus, I think we can still see adaptation faster than what we currently believe, right? So if you throw someone up into zero gravity and you don't do any countermeasures, and they do a lot of very effective countermeasures now, you start losing muscle mass super fast. You start losing bone. Like within a couple of days, your fluid will shift up and your body will just start pissing out a bunch of fluid, and then all the baroreceptors get reset. So what happens to a lot of astronauts even now sometimes when they come back, it's hard for them to walk, not necessarily because of muscular strength, but sometimes because of the fluid shift, and their body is used to having all this fluid kind of up in this area.
Why is it up here?
Because of no gravity.
Oh, so it
right?
just floats.
It just everything basically goes up, so to speak. So even now I think of that, like even with some RPR stuff. Okay, we give it the right stimulus. Oh, the glute does work better, right?
Wow.
So I think if you can find the correct stimulus, that you can see a faster adaptation. So anyway, so I did that stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah, and for fun. And then my
aerospace engineering and exercise physiology for fun.
Yeah, literally. Because those are like my easy classes. That's the shit I didn't study for.
I'm not that smart, y'all. I was a business major.
Yeah.
I have 1 degree.
Yeah, that's all right. And that was the only class I didn't. Like math, like engineering stuff was like literally freaking hell.
Yeah.
I literally was in, like for calculus, I was in the TA's office every day. For every math class was just a struggle to get through it. But anatomy and physiology was easy. I could sit there, I would learn it, and I would study the night before the test and do fine. Where math, I had to do the problems 2-3 times at least, in order to do it. In hindsight, if I knew how much math was involved in engineering, there's not a chance in hell I would have ever done it. I was just stupid and didn't know any better.
Right.
Even for a master's, I thought, well, yeah, there's no math beyond, Calc 4, linear algebra and differential equations. It must just end there. It doesn't.
Yeah, right.
And
theoretical math and...
Yeah, for a master's, you have to take at least 2 more math classes. And then the research I ended up doing, because I couldn't get funding, was literally to create a ray gun. And
That's
like
cool.
You've seen, it was declassified 4 years after I did it. My advisor at the time sends me this little note in the paper. It says, military declassifies ray gun. And he goes, yeah, this is what your research was on. I was like, oh.
Wow.
So they did high-frequency microwave transmitters. At the time, they said, oh, this is for collision avoidance systems on cars. I'm like, all right, whatever. You're going to pay for me to do research. That's cool. Why did they throw Yahoos at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas? Like, why are they on this grant? She's like, oh, don't worry about them. And I'm like, okay. Right. And I'm like, that's a little weird. I don't know what they care about collision avoidance systems. So what I did is created a computer-generated model of a monkey head in front of a microwave transmitter, and then you can do different scenarios. You could have sweating monkey, non-sweating monkey, hairy monkey, non-hairy monkey, big fan, big transmitter, small transmitter.
Wow.
You can run through all these different scenarios. What the military wanted to see is there any deep tissue heating effects. So if we take this thing, we point it at you, do we zap all your internal organs or anything else? And what they found was in the gigahertz range, so super, super high frequency, penetration depth is about a couple millimeters. So if you had a microwave that was in the gigahertz range, you put food in there, you'd burn the piss out of the outside and the inside would be frozen. So your microwave is at a lower frequency, so it's actually penetrating.
Okay.
What they wanted was basically to control crowds. So after 9/11, everyone wanted some type of non-lethal crowd dispersion technology. Because if there's a riot, if there's something else going on, you point this thing at a group of people, feels like their skin's being burnt by a light bulb, so they will dissipate.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's actually used in the military now. If you look at what's called active denial system, hasn't been used all that much, basically because the military is not really so good with non-lethal methods. It's just not part of the culture, really, you know? Because a buddy of mine, he actually had it tested on him, and I said, how did it feel? He's like, oh. It's like when you're in that beam, he said it hurts like holy hell. But the beam is so concentrated, like if here's the line of the beam, you can literally be in here, move like a couple feet over, and you're out of the beam. And it can go for like, a quarter mile.
Yeah.
I talked to another guy who was an operator on one of the systems, and I asked him, I said, well, what if you point this at like a crowd of people or insurgents or whatever, and someone's still running at you? And he's like, we shoot them because they're clearly a threat. He's like, that's not normal. I'm like, oh.
That doesn't bother me. I'm just going to shoot you.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess that kind of makes sense. You give them the verbal warning, you throw this thing at them that hurts like hell, and they're still coming at you. They're probably going to do some harm to you.
Yeah.
So that was my research on that. Got done, and then I started.
Where was that on career day? Like in high school, I don't remember that. Like, learn how to study ray guns.
Yeah. It may be useful at some point in your life.
Right.
I started working for a medical technology company it was Guidant, and later bought by Boston Scientific. So it was implantable pacemakers, defibrillators, cardiac technology. Mm-hmm. And super interesting, super fascinating. So I did that for a while, and I said, I'm never going back to school. There's not a chance in hell. I did almost 8 years. Screw that, whatever. So about 2 years after that, they're like, well, if you go back to school, we'll help pay for your education if you can show it's work-related. Like, really? You're going to pay for, like, my advanced physiology classes I just want to take because it's cool and I claim it's work-related? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So I just started taking advanced physiology classes for fun. And then met a guy who's like, oh, you should just, apply for the PhD in biomedical. So I'm like, I kind of thought about getting another master's, but I'm like, no one cares if you have another master's, really. So I ended up applying for the PhD program. Short story on that is that it took 1.5 years for me to get in. And I got so annoyed towards the end that they wouldn't return my calls, wouldn't do anything. So I just said, who's the guy that has to decide if I'm in or out? Just tell me if I'm in or out. And he's like, oh, it's this dude. I said, okay. Well, does he have office hours ever? Well, kind of, sort of. And so during my free time, I'd go down there and I'd just start sitting outside his office and wait for him to show up. He finally shows up after like the 5th time, go into his office, said, hey, I'm here. I applied for, grad program. It's like, I don't know where your application is. I think we lost it. And at this point, I'm just like, oh.
And it's not a short application process.
No. And I'm like, you're killing me. And for whatever reason, this guy's office, there's books everywhere. There's crap hanging from everything. And I don't know what compelled me, but there's this purple folder like buried under like 5 stacks of books like this. And I jokingly said, oh, is it that dusty folder there? He pulls out the folder and goes, it is. And
of all the things you could have chosen.
He looks at it, and because they told me just you have a master's, just walk in, take the GRE. It's just a formality. You did engineering, you'll be fine.
Walk in and take the GRE.
And so Lee, like a dumbass, I literally walked in and took the GRE. Don't do that. That's It's a bad idea. I didn't even know what a good score was. I'm trying to solve the math things, thinking that that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's not what you're supposed to do.
Oh.
You're just supposed to figure out which answer it's not. Because if you try to solve all of them, you will completely run out of time like I did. And I didn't figure that out till, unfortunately, 2/3 of the way through the test. So he looks at my GRE score and he goes, "Your math score, is that a typo?" I'm like, "Well, it's a little low." He's like, "Your other two scores are basically verbal and essay writing at that time, higher than we've ever seen for engineering."
Right. Well,
He's like, "So technically your score is okay." So he gives me a bunch of crap, and so after a half hour later, he's like, "All right, you can audit 2 more classes, and then you're in." So got in, did that, basically took all the classes for that, decided I didn't want to do it because I was going to exercise physiology stuff, literally just for fun. Like we talked about at dinner the other night.
yeah.
I would show up to conferences and sit next to people and go, "Oh, cool. What do you guys do?" So, "Oh, we're trainers." I'm like, "Oh, awesome." Like, "Did you see the study about blah, blah, blah?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, but I'm sure you saw the study about this or that." They're like, "No." Like, "Who the hell are you?" I'm like, "Oh, I came to this for fun." And they're like, "What?" So I dropped out of the PhD program with literally only had 2 classes left, but I hadn't started any research yet, and decided because I was so sick of math. I had a MRI class where I knew I was hosed. And the guy's like, "Okay, we're now going to derive all the equations used in an MRI." And he starts drawing stuff on the board. And I'm like thinking, Christ, I have beyond a minor in math at this point. I don't even know what he's writing on the board.
That's not good.
No, it's like triple this and that, and later it was like Bessel equations and crazy stuff. And so I elbow the guy next to me, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, do you know what's going on?" And he's like, it was a PhD, I think, in electrical engineering. He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, no." So the EE who's doing his grad work, and it doesn't even know what's going on. So after that, I said, "Okay, I got to decide. If somehow I'm going to make it through this course, this is the route I have to go, or I'm just going to drop out and go to exercise phys." So drop out, go over to exercise phys, which means that you have to start all over from ground zero. That's a completely different department and everything like that. So I start there in fall, and I sit down at the first meeting. My advisor's like, "All right, we got 2 new projects. One, they both involve a lot of math. One's on heart rate variability, and one's on metabolic flexibility." Looks all the way around the table and points at me at the end. He's like, "Hey, you math boy, whatever your name is, these are your projects." And I'm like, "Oh, you gotta be freaking killing me." I came here to avoid math, and now I'm basically doing projects that are physiologic based, but they involve math.
Right.
Luckily, the math wasn't too bad. So all that to say, took 7 years to finish my PhD doing that. Ended up leaving the company I worked for about 3 years ago now. I did work for them part-time as I was going back to school. Because I got to the point where I said, I started training people on the side, and I was going back to school, and I just said, I know I need more physical time just to take classes. Can you let me work part-time? They basically said, "No, that's not possible." I said, "Okay, well, if you don't let me work part-time, then I'm going to quit." They're like, "Oh, wait, let's look at this a little bit more." So they were nice enough they found some job share agreement somewhere in HR that allowed me to work 24 hours for them and still maintain full benefits and everything too.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so I did that all along the way, thinking that once I finished my PhD, I'm just gonna quit and do training and stuff full time. But actually, how it's related to this podcast too is that I think it's cool and sexy for people like now to be an entrepreneur and to be hardcore and screw it, just quit your job, go work at the gym. And for some people I think that can work really well. For other people it's like, if you have a pretty good job, you may have more leverage there than what you think. I tell people, just see if you can work there maybe part-time, maybe keep some of your benefits. Maybe you start working at a gym at night. See if you even like it before you completely bail full ship and do something else. I think that can be done. So I was lucky that I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I kept, trying to save up a little bit more money and that kind of stuff. So once training and everything I was doing was surpassing my other income from my part-time med tech job, I said, okay, at that point, then I will leave. So I know I have enough income from here. I can free up, 25, 30 hours a week. I can make up for that difference.
Yeah.
But if you haven't done that, I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of doing just crazy stuff to make money and not necessarily trying to get the experience and to have money to spend on education, to maybe do an unpaid internship, to do these other things along the way that can be beneficial.
Yeah, and like for a lot of you who are, getting going in your careers, it was, 18 years of work to get to
Yeah.
the point where you're at now, right?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, and even, I've talked about this before, but my fitness career started because I graduated college in 2008, and there was no jobs.
Yeah.
So I sold
Yeah.
memberships at 24 Hour Fitness until I found my big kid job, right? And I got a job at Slingshot Sports selling kiteboarding,
Yeah.
kiteboards and,
Hey, buddy.
and wakeboards, right? Mike's a big kiteboarder. And then that wasn't a good fit for me, so we parted ways. And then I ended up coming back to become a trainer, right? But if it wasn't for that experience of a couple years of jobs I didn't like, it led me down this path. So, as Mike just said, taking that unpaid internship, finding out if you like it, if you read the ebook, it's very geared towards setting yourself up for success. Like, don't put yourself where you're like, go and rent 10,000 square feet and buy a bunch of equipment to see if you like being a trainer. Because you might, if it's your hobby, you might hate it.
Yeah.
Right. And then
especially
now
if you have to do it 24 almost hours a day when you start.
Right.
I mean, talk to how many guys who own gyms that freaking slept in their gym.
lot
That's
of them.
not that uncommon.
Yeah. A loft in the upstairs, and it seems cool that you got a break room. But like, yeah, that was my room for however many years until I,
Yeah, I know Doug and Mike, did
Yeah.
that. Doug Larson and Mike Bledsoe when they started their gym. So yeah, it's more common than people realize.
There is a rites of passage in this industry, and the luxury for me being on it, and Jessica obviously coming from the barbell business, Barbell Shrugged, and now with Fit Aid, and does some work with you, is that we have a lot of great individuals that have great stories, right? And a lot of this is geared towards that you spent 18 years and now probably up into 28 years of your life earning the right to be in the space that you're in now, and to be able to come down to Austin, teach a seminar, but then hang out for a few days, to be able to do that. What are you doing now? Like, so now that you're done with school, what is it that you do on a day-to-day?
Yeah, so it's pretty varied. So in terms of income right now, most of it's online training. So I do kind of one-on-one online training for training, nutrition, mobility, kind of all of it. It's basically people who have, if you could follow like the program of the month from whatever magazine, you'll probably never work with me.
Yeah.
Just because, one, you don't need to. You don't need
Right.
to spend that much money. And two, you don't really have that big of a problem you're trying to fix. But if you have a bigger problem, whether it's a metabolic thing, sometimes it's a movement thing where you're in the gray area where you're not worse off enough to go see a physical therapist, but every time you squat, something weird happens, mechanics related stuff. Those are kind of usually the people I work with. Some of them are, moderate, higher level athletes. Some of them are pretty high level athletes. Most of them are intermediate to advanced who have been training for quite a while. We're just trying to figure out stress and why their body's just not responding.
Yeah.
Whether they did some crazy physique competition, they did 3 of them in 1 year and didn't know any better, to
Most of them.
just other stuff. Yeah. So that's primarily it. And then I teach online for Broadview University. I'm a faculty member at the Carrick Institute. They do functional neurology. So there I'm helping them develop a human performance program with Dr. Kenneth Shea, Dr. Freddie Garcia. And briefly on that, when it's done, hopefully it'll be out January 2018, maybe a little bit after that. But it'll literally be a 300 level at a graduate level course on all human performance, from bioenergetics to cardiovascular to neurology. And it'll be set up in a way that, like Kenneth and I, when we're doing it, wanted to have a program that if we could do everything all over again in the shortest amount of time, which is still a lot of time, can you teach someone at a high level and then have all the application at the same time? Because like you were saying before, there's a lot of really good exercise phys programs, but most of the time you don't have to apply that.
Right.
And that's okay maybe if you're going to different aspects of research, but if you're going out into the real world, at some point you're going to have to apply it. So we wanted to have a course where most of it's actually online, So it'll be a flipped classroom, and they'll be able to do a lot of the material online. They'll probably right now take 4 3-day weekends over the course of a year.
Oh, wow.
Come into a location and do pretty much some lecture and all practical. So if we're doing like a high intensity test on a rower, we'll have rowers there. If we're looking at blood glucose, ketones, whatever, and there'll be basically 4 components, and it'll be 3 days for each part. So the nice part is that at the end, you can have the equivalent of basically a master's type level education in both application and education. So that's pretty fun. Also probably, actually, I can tell people this. I'm doing a certification on metabolic flexibility, which will be under what's called Flex Diet. So you can look for more information on that.
What is metabolic flexibility? Is that like if it fits your macros, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so Flex Diet has kind of a double meaning.
Okay.
So at one hand is it's more flexible dieting. So not trying to be super rigid about everything, giving people flexibility, whether it's counting macros or portions or looking at eating more protein, things of that nature, and trying to realize that there's multiple ways to do it, not just you have to be ketogenic or you have to be low carb or whatever the trendy thing is. And then the subset of that is metabolic flexibility, which is how well your body can use both fats and carbohydrates and switch back and forth. So if you go to do high intensity exercise, weight training, primarily want to use carbohydrates. At rest, so as we're sitting here doing this podcast, primarily want to be using fat. And how can you increase both of those to the highest degree? And then how fast can you switch back and forth? So some of that involves maybe some timing of carbohydrates around exercise, maybe not having carbohydrates before a recovery aerobic type session for reasons of increasing the use of fat. So it's trying to maximize the performance aspect and then also body composition at the same time. So I think there's some systems that'll work really well for body composition, but people really don't want to see their performance in the gym really tank either.
Right.
Obviously, if I sit around and eat a ton of food all day, my performance in the gym is probably going to be a little bit better. Yeah, but my body composition may actually suffer at that point too. So trying to teach people a certification for trainers, how to do both of those things, how to set up a framework that makes sense, that they can then go back out to their clients and have sort of a little bit more of a done-for-you type thing.
I think and there's not a ton of nutrition education, and if it is, it's focused around that's their system, that there's a flag in the ground, that this is, you have to be vegan, you have to be paleo, you have to be keto, as opposed to like, you're looking a lot at the why and the how.
Yeah.
Like, how does that dial, like, okay, well, if you have this volume dial of fat, carbohydrate, right, and then how easily that turns. I think that's really interesting, and being able to, like, if you're a trainer at a major corporate gym, or you're at a CrossFit box, or you're at an Onnit, being able to, like, what's the best tool for that client? And if they're an Olympic lifter, their performance, like, they might be eating to perform, right? But they're also in a weight class. So they need to be able to stay within their 72 kilos or 69 kilos. And so they, they get to eat to perform, but they have to, so the timing and then the being able to use that dial is probably super key for them. Versus, like, you have an Olympic shot putter who's like, F it, I can eat 9 triple cheeseburgers because I'm just a power athlete. I don't care. Right? I wish
Especially when you're in the upper weight class. There is no heavier weight class. So,
It's like the dream athlete. Like, I'm an Olympic athlete. I'm super strong, and I don't care. But then eating for your body composition, which is what most people's clients probably care about the most. But I think that a lot of trainers, their clients fall into, I want abs. I want bigger arms. But I still want to drink a bottle of wine every night. Right. And I still want to be able to go to happy hour.
I want to have a life.
Right. Yeah. So is that a lot of it too? Like, helping give them the tools to teach their clients about what's the best tool for them without needing to be like an RD or have a PhD in metabolic. What's the PhD in?
Exercise phys, but metabolic flexibility.
Metabolic flexibility.
Research. Yeah. And the nice part is that, because to me, I view it as a cooperation type thing. Because you get all these people like, oh, should I do this? What about keto versus paleo and this or that? And if you look at it and go all the way up and look at, well, what's the main overarching framework in terms of physiology, and you understand that, you can kind of plug in whatever you want. If you say, I find that a paleo approach works better for me, cool. Then we'll plug that in here, and maybe before your weight training, you're going to have more sweet potatoes and white rice after, and you can use different types of food.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, fat's like the thing we have to use all the time. Yeah, as long as you're not doing high intensity exercise. Ketogenic diet can be really cool if you have some metabolic issues, you've got maybe some other brain stuff going on, or you're just not doing a lot of intense exercise. If you are doing a lot of intense exercise, you got to really know what the hell you're doing, and probably going to need some carbohydrates if you want to be ultra competitive doing that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just what context are you trying to use that? Now if you take the average American who doesn't exercise a lot and you just keep throwing an excess of carbohydrates on them, yeah, they're going to have metabolic issues too. Doesn't mean carbohydrates are bad and evil. It just means that in that amount, their body just can't handle it that well, and there's going to be a cost associated with that. So just kind of looking at trying to make it less dogmatic and trying to give people a framework that whatever they like and what their client likes, they can, fit in. Like you said, if client says, I had one guy come to me once and say, okay, I want to get stronger. I want to lose about 30 pounds. I said, okay, we can do that. I said, is there any sort of things you're not willing to give up during this process? He's like, I'm drinking 1 beer a night, every night, and I have no plans to give that up. I'm like, okay, we can argue all day if that's good or bad, but I'm probably not going to go day one and go, hey, bro, stop drinking. I mean, he's going to run out the door and say, screw you, I'm not doing it. And the reality is we could work around that, and we did a bunch of other stuff, and he was pretty successful. Now, if he says, hey, I want to drink 12 beers every night, well, that's a whole nother issue, right? But as long as you're in some type of moderate approach and you know what you're doing, you can find a way to kind of fit everything in. So I like thinking of trying to fit the physiology more to their psychology, because that seems to be faster. And of course, can you try to change the psychology and mindset a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. That's by far extremely beneficial. But it can be a lot harder too, and at the end of the day, I think the mindset actually will trump everything else. What they believe for whatever reason, try to work maybe within that as best you can and slowly change it over time. One of the questions I got from another trainer, Frankie, is I'll ask him, I said, okay, what exercise do you believe is most responsible for your current results? If they say standing on a Bosu ball, left arm dumbbell curls, and I press it overhead, and I do that for 15 reps every day. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But I'm probably going to put it in their program, right? Because if I take that out, they're going to look at their program, they're going to scan for that, and they're going to go, I told this dumbass trainer that this was the number one thing responsible for my results, and he didn't even put it in my program.
Yeah.
Over time, I'm hopefully going to get them, to do less dumb stuff, but I'm going to try to work within their current mindset and then slowly trying to change that over time. I think a lot of trainers go, all right, I'm a trainer, I'm the man, you're going to do everything I tell you to do. And there are a percentage of people that do that, but they don't usually learn anything in the process. And if you look at what happens when they stop working with someone, it's normally a train wreck. But the vast majority of people then are just going to be like a couple of weeks, and then they just disappear and they go back to where they were before.
Totally.
Most people can't handle that amount of change in that short period of time.
I think that was honestly such a great nugget of information. Like, you as a coach, yes, you are the expert. They've given you, they've hired you because you have referent power or expert power. And it's now, well, sure. Do I think that standing and doing, bicep curl to press on a Bosu ball, single leg is great? No, but they attach value to it. Yeah. Right. And so part of training is also making sure that the client feels empowered to do what they need to do. Right. And so you still have to be malleable as a coach to be able to do that. And so you're just playing, what's it called? Not a puppeteer, but what's the guy that, marionette. Like you're playing with marionettes. Right. And it's like, okay, yeah, you get a little bit of that, but you're also getting what you want. And so at the end of the day, anything that you're giving to them is so much more than they were doing. And, we speak about this with athletes all the time. The best ability is availability. Yes. Well, for your everyday Grandma Betty client, consistency is probably the number one thing that they can do, because if they're up and down all the time, not training, or I got hurt, or I fell off the wagon, they're never going to see results. Yeah. But if they just spent a year and, dabbling in multiple variables and, whether it's metabolic flexibility programming with their diet or paleo or keto or just going on an hour-long walk every day for a year, like that's so much more valuable than, like, oh, I did 6 months really hardcore and then I'm back to crushing 12 beers a night.
Oh, yeah. And that's what we see in all the literature, right? If you look at almost all the literature, you'll find multiple diets will work if they're consistent. Obviously, calories matter, all that kind of stuff. But it's the consistency over time of being able to do it. And usually losing the weight for most people is not as hard as keeping it off. If you look at the recidivism rate of diets, it's in like the high 90%.
Wow.
And my bias is that I think the approach they may have done was probably a little bit too hard.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit too simplistic and not done in a way that they were learning and done in a way that's also sustainable too. So I think if you can do that, again, it becomes much more of a lifestyle, right? And I think there's literature to have to double check that to be considered a lifelong exerciser, you have to do it consistently for, I think, 3+ days per week for 2 years, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So at your first glance, you go, oh my God, 2 years, that's horribly long. But if you think about 2 years over the course of your lifetime, that's not too bad.
Right.
And those people historically will always do some form of exercise. It may change, but they're considered a very active, population. So I think making sure that we support people for an educational system and a sustainability, accountability, so that they keep doing those things consistently enough. Hopefully they get over that threshold, whatever that is for nutrition. I don't know if we have a good idea, but that they can then do it and repeat it over time.
So what do you think is if you've got a brand new person signing up for sessions, or I sign up for sessions right now, do you address the metabolism and their intake first, or do you address exercise first?
Ooh, that's a good question. I actually 90% of the time do both.
Okay.
Because what I found, I don't know who I stole this from, Lee Labrada, I think. Because the question is, right, so what's more important, diet or exercise?
Right.
And you're all these
question.
like crazy, so abs are made in the kitchen and all this stuff. And I get it, right? If you say, okay, I want to drop 30 pounds as fast as possible, is diet probably a greater leverage than exercise? Yes. And you look at all the studies, and then you have people who are like, calories are the only thing that matters. Just whack a crap ton of calories out of their diet, poof, they lose weight. And I always like Stu Phillips' comment that if you take people and say, do you know that exercise and calories matter? They'll say yes. Right. So Stu Phillips has a quote where he says, telling the average person to eat less and move more is like telling a depressed person to have a nice day. And I love that because it's like, are you actually correct? You are 100% correct.
That's great. I love that.
If I tell you exercise more, eat less. But is it, at the end of the day, is it effective?
Right.
Just telling someone that? No.
Right.
Most people already know that. So I think both of them are important for different reasons. If you look in the literature, yes, the easiest way to drop calories is to stop eating as many high, dense caloric foods. But exercise, even though it's a lesser component, newer research shows it has helped re-regulating the brain to be autonomously controlling caloric intake and expenditure. So it's going back to that sustainability part. What I do with people is I'll say, okay, what are you doing for exercise? Can we modify it a little bit? What are you doing for nutrition? Can we modify that a little bit? And in rare occasions, you'll have sometimes where I only do nutrition work or I only do movement work. Or you may have someone who says, I'm hell-bent on doing CrossFit or whatever exercise 4 days a week. I'm going to try to do some lifestyle stuff to work around that. Usually I don't work with them because I know they're just going to burn themselves out anyway, because usually they come to me already burnt out. If that was working well for them, they wouldn't find me anyway.
Right.
So I like to do both because I want them to go into it with the mindset of being, hey man, you're going to have to make some changes in each area. They don't have to be dramatic. They don't have to be super crazy, but to get to where you want to go, you kind of have to play with both of them. So I'll try to do both because they're working for different reasons. If someone says they're really on a time course for whatever reason and it's super short, I usually don't work with those people, but if it was some big thing, they're going to be a pro athlete and they got to drop 10 pounds or whatever. To me, it has to be some pretty large reason. Yeah, I'm going to cutting more calories is going to be beneficial. But I think doing some type in both. And then the third part to that, or second part, is making sure that they actually line up and make sense. Right? So if I say, hey, your goal is body comp, you want your performance to be good, I'm probably going to have you do more a fasted walk in the morning. Now, we can argue all day about, low intensity cardio and fat use and fasted cardio for fat loss and all that other kind of stuff. But it's super easy. Get up, walk out your door, walk around the block, do 20 minutes, come back. Right? So adherence is going to be higher because they're more likely to do it. You have all the other things like sunlight exposure. I'll tell them don't wear sunglasses in the morning. The sunlight hits the back of the eyes, which helps reset circadian rhythms, because most of the time their circadian rhythms are completely screwballed, which then screws with their appetite. So by doing that, you basically try to re-anchor their circadian rhythm to a day-night schedule. And just like 20 minutes of sunlight, indoor light's probably not a strong enough lux to do that effect. I got this from Dan Party. I found it works really well. That actually, for me and my clients, works better than trying to have them re-regulate at the end of the day. Works better than trying to get them to go to bed earlier and all the other stuff that's beneficial. You're primarily using fat as a fuel, right? So if you're borderline type 2 diabetic, we know that's dysregulated. So I think there's a lot of other things that are working in your advantage in that scenario beyond just the calories and fasted cardio.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing with weight training, right? Having some carbs, whether higher amounts during that day or before or different things, you're going to feel better during your training. It's going to be easier. You're going to recover better. You're probably going to like training better because it doesn't feel as abysmal.
Yeah.
If we put you on a ketogenic diet and told you to keep doing heavy weight training every day, you're probably not going to like me very much after a while. Right? And yeah, athletes that are super hardcore, you work with a wrestler and tell them, bro, run through that wall. They're like, cool, how fast? 10 miles an hour. All right, done, man. They're like through the wall. But the average person, they're not really that mindset. So I try to set it up in as much as what's called eustress versus distress.
Right.
So eustress is a stress we can apply to your system that it can relatively recover from in short order. A distress is a stressor that is much harder for your system to recover from. Right? So a classic example I use is just powerlifting. So most of the training I do with powerlifters is going to be eustress. Going to push volume a little bit, some density, some intensity. I would rather have you train more frequently than less, but most of your training is going to be sub-failure, 1 to 2, maybe 3 reps away from failure. I want to see how much volume you can accumulate. I want to keep the quality as high as possible. That's kind of a eustress model. However, the day you're doing your competition, that's probably going to be a massive distress. Right? You're going to go almost to failure. Sometimes you probably are going to go to failure because you may miss a lift. And most of those people, unless they're a real advanced athlete, are not going to go back to the gym and train on Monday if their competition was Saturday.
Yeah.
If they are, it's very light recovery work. They're not going to try to max out again on Monday.
No.
It's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 2 weeks to recover from that massive amount of stress that you put on them on one day. So I like to set stuff up for both nutrition and training, as much eustress as I possibly can, and then periods of distress.
Okay.
So I think that builds up a much higher resiliency. Some people in fitness will go almost a little bit too far to the other extreme, where everything is always eustress, right? I'm in bed by 9:30 every night. I eat the same meals every time. I eat every 2 to 3 hours. Fasting's for idiots. A lot of very, very regimented. And that works really, really well until something doesn't go well, right? Until they miss a meal, until they stayed out till 11 p.m., or their body has a hard time getting back online because that to them was a pretty massive stressor. But if you throw those things in every once in a while, the body can now adapt to it within reason. So if I do a period of fasting, I'll even have some advanced athletes train completely fasted with a horrible HRV score, knowing that everything up until that point was really good, and some stressor happened, and the time course is short. So I may tell them, okay, go to the gym. I want you just to safely max out on your deadlift today. Do nothing else. And they're like, really? I'm like, yep. They come back, oh, bro, I got like a 5-pound PR. Awesome, cool. But the next day is going to probably be recovery. The next day after that is probably going to be recovery. So what am I doing? I want to push that distress just a little bit. And I want them to be mentally resilient to the fact that this may happen before your competition, right? Especially if you've got athletes that travel, the food gets screwed up. They've been on a plane, they haven't moved, the site gets moved. God knows there's a bazillion things that'll probably happen to them at some point. Their HRV or monitoring you use may go in this shitter. It probably will. And then you just remind them and say, okay, remember when your HRV was crap, you fasted for 12 hours or 20 hours or whatever we do, and you got that PR on your deadlift? Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay, right? We've practiced for this. We knew this was coming. You're going to be okay at that point.
Wow.
And usually they do okay. Not always.
Right.
Doesn't always work.
Right.
But the last thing you want is them to just mentally freak out and just start circling the drain. And I don't do a lot of, mindset or sports psychology or anything like that. But it's just, I want some of that in their training. But in training, I still want it as controlled as possible. Because the issue I'm running is if they miss their deadlift there or they do horrible because I misjudged what's going on, it may not be so good, right? So you want to be kind of careful with that. But to me, I would rather plan for that and work that into the schedule a little bit so that they are more resilient when that actually counts. So
that's
a long-winded answer. So
no, that was amazing. That was so many nuggets of like even just the circadian rhythm change from walking in the morning.
Yeah, sunlight exposure to eyeballs is huge.
Because I wear sunglasses when I was how old was I? 15, 16. I went snowboarding and I forgot my snowboarding goggles, so I wore my motorcycle goggles and they were clear.
Yeah.
And so then like I couldn't. They're not set up for the snow, so my eyes. So then I like stopped wearing the goggles because they weren't working anyway.
Yeah.
And then like from then, like my vision's still fine. But my sight is very sensitive to bright light.
Sure.
So now I've been even more like I always wear sunglasses. Like very rarely will you see me where I have to be outside where I don't bring them.
Yeah.
And my sleep has been off in the last few years.
Yeah.
And I wasn't always the best sleeper as a kid anyway.
Yeah.
But then now that coming from powerlifting, like I used to be able to handle a ton of volume, right, and load, and then now it's like I'm in this job, I'm on an airplane all the time.
Yeah.
I've got a ton of distress in my life. My lifts went from being like I used to care about hitting 92, 95, 97%, and now I'm like, maybe I'm gonna deadlift today. Maybe I'm just gonna go row. Maybe I'm gonna run some spread. Like it's so playful, which is fine, but like because being in a traditional like 4-day a week split crushes my nervous system so hard where I don't recover at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's so interesting. Like, and I think walking's the most underutilized tool of fitness anyway.
Totally.
And doing it in the morning without sunglasses, I think that's such a
Because the other part too I like about that is that you're getting enough of the lux via the light that it's not intense enough that you're going to have any real damage to your eyes or anything like that. I'm not telling people go out at high noon, stare at the sun, and walk for an hour. Don't be stupid. But I mean, I found that out too because I would always wear sunglasses. My eyes are very sensitive to sunlight, and I was talking to Dan Party once about this, and we got talking, and I'm like, oh, I wonder, can the eye adapt to higher amounts of light because it's muscular control, just like anything else? Maybe my eyes are just have had no stimulus to adapt at all, so maybe they're not as good. I don't know. I'm just making that up. And he was talking about the experiments they did in Antarctica where they would basically control all the light and people's circadian rhythms would get hosed. And so then about 4 years ago, I had people starting to do more AM walks. That's what I try to do now too, because it's just the light movement. You can also get into some weird neurology stuff with the eyeballs, looking at distance, looking even at images, what they call fractal images. There's some stuff called forest bathing, which initially I thought was a bunch of hippies running around the forest, like whacking themselves with trees and stuff. But as they're like shower, but it's actually just being in nature, right? So how often, if you go out in nature, people are like, oh, I took this nice hike through the woods. Oh, it was relaxing. Very rarely, unless they're being chased by a bear, they're like, oh, it was so stressful, But being inside, being in cars. So eyes, in terms of focal accommodation, will adjust to whatever distance you're having them work all the time, because it's muscular controlled.
Oh,
Right? So
computer screen,
explain to people,
phone.
yeah, if you're on your computer screen, all of a sudden you look up just across the room 6 feet away, and it takes 1 to 2 seconds for that to come into focus. That's not normal. That's your muscles having a delayed reaction to basically reaccommodate your focus. Just like if you sit all day, your hip flexor is going to get tighter because it's in a shortened position.
Right.
So walking outside, you're having to look super far away. You're having to look at different objects. You're having to look at different images and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of just simple benefits that we tend to forget about. And the fitness world is kind of horrible for this because everyone just wants to talk about fasted cardio or not. Is that the best for fat loss? The reality is there's only one study done on that at all. So we can debate.
There's only one study done on fasted cardio.
One study that's a controlled intervention study
Wow.
for the purpose of fat loss and body composition. It was done by my buddy, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. And in that study in females, so they did not use a metabolic cart because they didn't have access to one. So we don't know the actual fuel mix they were using, which I would argue is debatable.
Right.
It did not show any effect. So what's interesting, though, is there's some other work that I did, Gadecki, Helges, one other guy I'm blanking on right now, where they took people and they said, okay, you're fasted, come in off the street. We're going to do resting or very low intensity exercise. We're just simply going to measure what fuel does your body use. Now, all the exercise physiology textbooks will say you're just using fat. And most people, that's true, but some people were not. So I had a couple of people that were like burning carbohydrates just at a super low intensity exercise. And it wasn't that they were incredibly detrained. You know, they weren't like out of breath or anything like that. It was still low intensity exercise for them. So if you take all those studies and you pull them together, you'll find that the ability to use fat at rest varies from about 20 to 93% from just one individual to the next. So I would argue that in those people who are burning more carbohydrates at rest, that fasted cardio is probably going to be much more beneficial for them, probably more from a metabolic health. Now, are we really going to see a massive difference if we really control all the calories between one group and the next? Body composition-wise, probably not. But I think from a metabolic health standpoint, we'll find that using carbohydrates at rest puts you at a higher risk for other things, right? We know from type 2 diabetics that they tend to use carbohydrates at rest at a higher degree. They also have a loss of carbohydrate metabolism too. So they're getting metabolically inflexible. They're getting squished from both ends of the spectrum. So I tell people, it's like, okay, so I have a little Volkswagen Jetta, and I'm just driving around town, and I'm one of those douchebags that's like, like trying to redline the car all the time. Am I still getting from point A to point B? Yeah. Am I causing probably a lot more stress on the engine than what I need to? I think so.
Yeah.
And again, that's all to be sorted out. There's other studies by Dr. Scott Robinson that's looked at max fat oxidation related to other metabolic health parameters, and it is predictive. And so there's some pretty good data in that area. It's not super hardcore. But again, going back to the question that people in fitness are like, oh, it's body comp only. We're only worried about fat loss. And yeah, that's true. But we need to look at the big picture of all the other things that are also influencing it. And in general, if you can just make someone more healthy, it's going to be much easier for them to sustain less calories, right? If we take you and we screw up, they've done this at the University of Illinois. I think it was 5 days of sleep deprivation in normal, healthy college students, and they were borderline type 2 diabetic at the end of that. Now, I think they really pushed them. I think that was like only 4 hours of sleep a night or something like that. So it's pretty aggressive. But the fact that you could do something, sleep, change that, and their glucose metabolism could just get hosed, to me is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
The good part is the flip side was also true. Once they gave them enough sleep, they went back to being normal again. So their systems are pretty plastic to go both directions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Diabetes and sleep.
A huge correlation. And you just think about all the people that just don't get enough sleep and stress and all that kind of stuff too. So it's all it's more interrelated than I think we want to believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, calories matter, but I think it's more complicated than just that.
It amazes me how much information you're able to intake all the time. And granted that you really love doing it. You take, master's level
Oh
300
yeah.
courses for fun. But, and you dropped this nugget earlier that, maybe they may not be the right client for me. Right. And so you're very conscious of your time and how many clients you're willing to take on, and are they the right fit for you?
Yeah.
Because it's your name, it's yours, and you write a ton, you do a ton of research. And so in order for you to do the things, other aspects of your job and teach, you have to be able to have that flexibility with your schedule.
Totally.
How many clients a week do you train, or how many clients do you take on at one time?
Yeah, so right now for one-on-one online, I only do 12 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't do that many, just because of the time involved, the setup, and usually for 90% of those, I'm doing all their training, nutrition, lifestyle, pretty
Very
much
immersive.
everything. Yeah, and they get full email access if they have any questions or anything like that. And I like doing it. It's usually when there's spots open, you have to apply, so there's application, and then usually half hour to sometimes an hour, phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, if I still feel like, I don't think this is going to work, then I'm like, I just don't think we're a good fit, which happens.
Which is super important, and it doesn't reflect on you or the
No,
client.
no.
It just, we're not matching up. And I
Yeah.
think that's super important for the young kids to realize too. There's a difference when you're a brand new trainer. You have to take everybody because you need to
Sure.
learn who resonates with you.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
And I'm sure you kind of know going in, are they even going to match up with me in the beginning?
Yeah.
Let alone if it's going to be something that we can spend 12 weeks together in a very, I'm going to be up in your life.
Yeah.
In a very detail-oriented way,
Oh,
from
yeah.
programming to life to food, and it's going to change some aspects in terms of how you look at things. So,
Oh, yeah.
I think, how long did it take you to realize that, you can only handle so many people? And
Yeah, I tried doing more than that. And the cutoff I found was, could I do it? Sure.
Yeah.
So if you came tomorrow and said, put a gun to my head and said, all right, you're going to work with 24 people, could I do it? Yeah, I could.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think I'm doing the best service I can to those 24 people? No. So I found there was a point where I felt like I was going through the motions of just doing it, and I probably wasn't giving them the best service either.
That's so key to realize that.
And it really actually didn't have a lot to do with time.
Uh-huh.
It had a lot to do with what else I had going on, how much I'm going to allow myself to switch tasks, how well I screened people, because I probably would allow people in that maybe weren't that good of a fit. And then I'd be kind of pissed at them and going, oh, why are you doing this or that? And I realized that, oh, well, they told me they were doing, doing that. And I said, oh, okay, I'll still work with you type thing. So what I try to do now is that I try not to get as much. Yeah, they get an exercise program. Yeah, they get a nutrition program. Yeah, they know exactly what to do. We keep track of their compliance. They have to check in on Sunday night. They have all the standard things. But then I also try to look at, okay, what's like the super big picture, right? Send me some videos of your movement. Tell me about other things. Tell me about, like, even just the medical form is like surgeries, scars, tattoos, just a whole list of things that don't really seem relevant.
Yeah.
But so, for example, I did a screening call with the guy last week. Super stressed out, super cool dude. Had done a lot of training, had seen some pretty good changes, but just seemed like he felt very stressed, didn't know what to do next. And when I'm talking to him at the end, I said, okay, it's a weird question, but I'm guessing you had some weird dental stuff growing up. He's like, yeah, I had braces and everything. And then my teeth realigned, and I actually had to have Invisaligns again recently. I said, I said, if you poke around in your mid sort of stomach area, is that sensitive? He's like, yeah. I'm like, if you close your mouth, do your back teeth make contact? He's like, no. And I'm like, let me guess, you probably pulled your hamstring and your glutes don't work very well. Yeah. You just go down the line because he's super high anxiety. I said,
wow.
Are you on any medications for anxiety? He said, no, but his doctor wants to put him on one. Do you have a hard time making decisions? Yeah. Do you feel stressed? Yep. Is your sleep disrupted? Yep. Because I've seen that exact profile like so many times in person before, and just seeing the video, you can see how much they clench their jaw during the lift. You can watch their breathing pattern in between, reps. You can ask them resting heart rate, all that kind of stuff. So palate development because of the teeth being skewed. And so there's a lot of weird stuff that sounds like you're just some wackadoodle asking them nutball questions. But when you run down the list, I go, you have this, 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 and this. He's like, yeah. He goes, how the hell did you know all that? I said, well, just by some stuff that I've gone through myself, working with other people. And he goes, oh, so you're not just like a normal trainer, are you? And I'm like, well, not really, because that's not what I'm interested in.
Right.
So again, someone like that, probably a good fit, right? Someone like that goes to someone else who just says, hey, you just got to exercise harder and just be more hardcore paleo or whatever.
Right.
Probably going to break them.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't necessarily mean that that's their fault.
Right.
But I think looking beyond of if I did this intervention, what was the result? And if I did this intervention again and I get the same result, you probably need to do a different intervention, and then I'm trying to go around the wall and not through the wall all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we've had a lot of really great knowledge nuggets dropped, not only from physiology and body work and business. What's a piece of advice that you'd like to give young new trainers getting into the industry, something that you feel like you've learned in your experience that they can improve on from where they're at getting started?
Yeah, so a couple of things is just figure out what it is you want to do and why do you want to do it. So we talked about this last night too, that so I teach and I get some students that come up and go, hey doc, I wanna open my own gym. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Number one question, do you like business? Do you have any business experience? No, I hate business. Okay, so you hate business. You realize that running a gym is going to be primarily a business. Do you have to understand fitness? Yes, all that kind of stuff. But you could technically hire trainers to do that. Most of the time, they're like, no. So I'm like, okay, probably not running a business, maybe not. Do you have any experience working as a trainer? No. Okay, I would recommend that you go get experience working as a trainer, even working for someone, work in a gym, figure out, do you like it or not? Obviously, you graduated through the program or you're graduating. Exercise physiology, the background. Can you now take that and can you apply it a little bit better? And when I teach at Broadview, it actually is a little bit more semi-applied program in general. So that's the biggest thing.
Cool.
The other part, too, related to that is, I think with social media and stuff now, you can look popular and still be broke and not do anything.
Totally.
Which is a separate podcast, and I'm not going to name any names of people, but we could all probably go down and name some people in the industry who are popular, quote unquote, on social media.
Yep.
I don't know what I would say their definition of successful is, even whether you pick monetary or freedom or whatever marker you want to use for that. And I know a lot of people that are extremely successful in a lot of aspects of their life that don't even have a Facebook account.
Right.
To me, those are the people that I want to know, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And usually that's like we talked about, figure out what you want, put in your time, learn as best you can. Everybody's going to start at the bottom, whether that's an unpaid internship, whether that's working at a big chain gym, whether that's whatever it is. You're not going to even start at the top, right? Because I get people that come to me and they're like, oh, that's so cool, you got a PhD. If I only had a PhD, I'd have all these opportunities. I'm like, maybe, but the reality is me personally, I don't think anyone really gives a shit.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just what I did because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did it. I think it's useful, but it's not like I got a PhD and like 15 people like were pounding down my door for me to do stuff for them.
Right.
It was the same thing it had been before. It's, who do you know? How can you help them? What kind of service can you deliver? And then the last thing is taking knowledge and then how do you apply it? I think there's a lot of people who want to collect certifications, and I'm all cool about let's do more, let's learn more. I think that's awesome. But like what you guys are doing here too, how does that fit into our system? How am I going to take this to a client on a warm-up on Monday morning?
Yep.
How is this going to change my training with them? And I don't have to use all of it, but I have to think, how do I learn this system, and now how do I apply it? How does it fit into what I want to do? And there's a lot of people that are like, wow, you ask them, why do you do this? Coach so-and-so said that. I said, oh, okay. But why do you do it? Like, what do you believe? Why are you doing foam rolling or whatever it is? Top coach so-and-so said foam rolling is the greatest thing ever. Like, okay, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Good place to start, but did you put any thought? Did you put any effort into it? Did you even look to see once you started foam rolling clients, did they get better?
Right.
Did they change? Are you just having them do stuff because someone told you it was cool? And that's what kind of irritates me a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, if this is your profession, my buddy Nick Tumanello said this too, that there's a lot of hobbyists and there's a lot of professionals in fitness. And that's fine if you want to be a fitness hobbyist. I have no issue with that. But just realize that that's what you're doing. If you're telling me that you want to be a professional and that you're not willing to spend money on education, you're not willing to eval what you do and put in the time and effort, I'm going to say probably more of a hobbyist. And that's cool. I don't have any issue with that at all. But just making sure you know kind of what route you want to go. And then if you want to go and be more of a professional, like any other profession, it's going to require education. It's going to require time. And you're going to probably start near the bottom and kind of have to work your way up from there. It's not any different. Nothing special.
I think that's the best knowledge bomb that you can possibly get right there.
Oh, thank you.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, just go. Probably the best place is just my website. Jessica helped for that.
Yeah,
so thank you very
thanks,
much. She did an awesome job. So shout out to her. Yeah, it's just MikeTNelson.com. There'll be a place you can sign up for a newsletter there. Get some cool offers. And most of my content's actually through newsletter. So I'd encourage people to sign up there.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time and for spending some time with us.
Thank you very
Really
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Fitness Break Room podcast, everybody. You can follow us on Instagram at Fitness Break Room. And if you're looking to enter our monthly fitness swag giveaway, you can visit our website, fitnessbreakroom.com, and all that info's on the homepage. Hundreds of dollars worth of awesome stuff, so I wouldn't miss that. And then you can even subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and leave us a review if you're digging what we're bringing you. That would be awesome and very helpful. Okay, guys, have a beautiful week. Stay strong and always look out for the little guy.
I know you